You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Welcome back to Last Call. It's Erica, and today we're going to be discussing how to get the most out of a new distributor relationship. Now, this segment is brought to you by SWIG Partners, and we've got Alex Cherniavsky, the managing partner of SWIG, to help us unpack that sticky topic. So, Alex, first thing, tell us about SWIG Partners and the work it does for suppliers.
Sure. So our company is focused on finding mutually beneficial partnerships between brands, so alcoholic brands and then non-alcoholic versions of that stuff that's meant for adults, so adult non-alcoholic, and importers and distributors. So people who you'll work with for a long time who will help you to grow your brands in individual markets.
Great. And tell me about some of the most common mistakes people make with a new distributor.
So the biggest one is people think that the distributor is going to just do everything, right? So you have your product, you sell it to them, and then you assume that it's like a done deal, you're done. That's not typically what happens. I mean, potentially there's like a unicorn out there where that's what's happening, but that's not truly what's happening. So the goal is to go into this as a partnership. So talk to the new distributor, talk about what would work in their market, because every market in the US is very, very different. The things that are successful, some of them are universal, but some of them are market to market and kind of really variable. So talk to the distributor and say, what can we do to have a successful launch in your market, and start that conversation. And sometimes it's, give me money for whatever this marketing incentive is. Maybe it's finding the right partner for in retail sales opportunities. So the right kind of third-party vendor who does those kinds of sales things. We have a client who really found a lot of success in a market because their distributor really recommended the right partner for that. Someone who does those in-store tastings, and they've seen a ton of sales because of that. And, they wouldn't have known who to contact on their own because the distributor really had the right connection. So working together to find that right person is really important, because you want to get your product out there. You want people to know that it exists. So, you should plan that you're going to be doing your own marketing. So you should have a budget for that. So whether it's print or it's the internet or whatever it is, that's obviously very important here. But you also want to work at what's important in that region. So whatever the distributor says works there, I would take their word for it, because you've done the work to put this business partnership together. You both want to see success, right? They don't want to buy something and then never have it sell. They want it sell with the product as well. So if you work together, you split costs or work whatever it is to make that the money part happen, because obviously these things don't happen for free. So you need to budget for that too. So if you haven't budgeted for marketing in a market, do it. Do it now, because otherwise you're going to get to that situation and you're going to have sold your product and then it's just going to sit there. And, if you don't market for that, it's not going anywhere, right?
Absolutely. And, what can you give a sense of how can suppliers find out what type of budget might be needed to go into a new market?
Yeah. So I think that talking to other people who work in that market, I think some of the people I've spoken with who are the most successful really talk to other people in their subset of the industry. So I know that there are a lot of, different groups that you can join, and you meet people at conferences and you meet people at sales opportunities. Really talk to everybody else who's selling the same stuff as you. Sure, they're your competition, but they can also be kind of one of your greatest assets. They can tell you about the distributor they worked with who was awful and you shouldn't work with. They can tell you about the people they did work with who were great. They can connect you with somebody else who might be a good business partner. Sometimes that's how we find people to work with. But you really want to talk to other people who are doing the same thing as you, because sometimes you can collaborate and work together to sell your product together, and kind of do a collaboration there. Or you can just get ideas and bounce ideas off each other. Other ways to kind of find that out, talk to distributors in the various markets, do market research and kind of figure out where things are selling. So if it's a very retail driven market, think about the ways that you can be successful in retail. If it's a very restaurant focused market, it's a very different approach. It's, there's very different things happening there. And then figuring out if you need a brand ambassador, if you need somebody to kind of be boots on the ground all the time in that market. If you're selling into bars, you probably need somebody going bar to bar all the time, selling things and buying shots and doing whatever the things that those people do are. And they're very different, depending upon what your product is. But I think you need to figure out what of those things that are required and then budget for them. Obviously, some are much more expensive than others.
Yeah, definitely. And also a good example of just how important it is to develop relationships in this business. And, along those lines, I want to talk about working with distributors. Can you give me a sense of what a well-formed partnership plan with a distributor, what it looks like, and how a brand should approach it? Like, how collaborative should it be with that distributor?
So some of the best examples of distributor relationships with brands I've seen, or they kind of sit down and they figure out their 5-year plan. They're like, here's where we think you can sell the first year and kind of how we can be successful. And this is what success would look like if you work with us. Here's what success would look like at year 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. And here's how we grow that together. You really want to work with somebody who is able to make those plans and really understands their market in a way that, can translate that to you and can translate that into success. Sometimes you work with a distributor and they're like, well, great, we'll buy your thing. And then we're going to try to sell it to XYZ partners, but there's really no plan. There's no plan in place. There's no kind of proactive way of approaching the market. And I think the most successful distributor partnerships I've seen are with people who both the distributor has a plan and the brand has a plan. And if those two things are in synergy, you're really looking at success there. And if they're not, you can kind of talk about why you both have different expectations and kind of how to make those things grow in the same direction. And I think a lot of that's really important.
Fantastic. And finally, what type of support should a brand plan to have in market?
So there's a lot of different kinds of things you should do. At a baseline, you should plan to visit the market, at least once for the startup and introduce yourself to the sales team and kind of get a feel for what you're doing there. So whether that's, going on a ride along and kind of going to different accounts, or it's throwing a dinner or whatever makes sense for your brand, or if it's, going to in-store tastings and kind of being very present with the sales team and kind of getting to know them and how they work. You can do that virtually too. And, if you can't travel to market every year, popping in virtually from time to time to do an extra staff training or something else to get them really excited about what you bring to the table and what your product is. Distributors have a ton of stuff in their book, and staying relevant to the people who are on the ground selling your product day after day after day is really important. So, you can do that with sales incentives for people. You can do it with just scheduling a staff training on your topic. We have a champagne producer who does regular staff trainings virtually from Champagne. And it's not even just about his brand. This is what Champagne is. And this is why grower Champagne is really cool. And this is why you should care about it. And yes, we also make one, but it's more about what the category is so that people can be very knowledgeable about selling the category. And, I see his product a ton in market because that distributor that he's training with is, in my home market, and it's great. So it's successful for him to be that present in those salespeople's mind. Additionally, you might need to hire, we talked about hiring a brand ambassador, and you might need to hire those kinds of people. But at a minimum, you really need to make sure that you yourself are present, or your winemaker is present, or someone from the company is present, whether in person or virtually. A lot of things have kind of switched to virtual now, so you can get away with a little bit more of that than you used to be able to. But you really want to make sure that they don't forget about you, or you don't get lost in a book somewhere, and that you're constantly a part of the conversation in the company.
Amazing. Yes. And virtual is good for those budgets. So, Alex, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. And Thanks everyone for listening to Business of Drinks. Follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and tap the notification button so you're the first to know when a new episode drops. And please help us spread the word. Click the star ratings, share on social. These things really do help us find new listeners. And finally, if there's something that you want us to discuss on Business of Drinks, let us know. We're at podcast@businessofdrinks.com or reach out via Instagram or LinkedIn. We want to hear from you, and we really do respond to messages. See you next time.